What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. So today we are taking a look at a library that has been around for quite a while, but one that I've really only recently taken a look at, mainly because I was scared of it not being in Contact. And so yes, it's a little shameful for me to say, but I am a Contact user through and through. But when I saw the demos for this recently and I saw kind of the updates they were doing to this library, I was instantly attracted to it because it looks amazing now, at least to me. And so I really wanted to get my hands on it. And I've always liked the tone of it. I've always really enjoyed the flexibility from what I've seen in the videos and heard of the demos. So I wanted to get my hands on it. So I reached out to Virharmonic. Big thanks to them for sending me a copy of the violin and the cello. I'm going to be doing separate videos on these, plus a giveaway for each. So if you've been interested in this library but never really got around to picking it up, hopefully this will kind of clear things up just a little bit, and it'll give you a chance to win the library as well. So let me quickly show you the sales page, and then we'll take a look at the instrument itself, and then we'll do the giveaway. So here's the violin, 249 euros, which I think for what you get inside and the flexibility, the sound, the tone, it's quite a fair price, I would say. Anything above, $300-400, that's kind of stepping into the more pricey territory, but I think 249 is okay. Then they have some demos here, which is nice. And then, they have some sales copies, some testimonials, which is nice. And then here they kind of tell you a little bit more about it. And then all the features, articulations, and the plugin itself. So it's applicable for both Mac and Windows. It runs in, let me see, it's the Gorilla engine. So it's not UVI anymore. They used to be running on the UVI engine, which apparently loaded a lot slower. And it just, it was a little more clunky, I guess. So now that it's on this engine, at least when I'm playing it, it feels a lot more responsive than some of my other libraries as well. Then, of course, they have longs, shorts, legatos, different types of legatos, different bowing types, some extended techniques, and then there's some features here as well. So with different moods, different modes, and then maestro mode, the crafting, reverb, and space, which you can play around with, and all of that stuff. Okay, so let me quickly just show you the interface here. Very pleasant blue. I actually really like how this looks. It's super, super simple. This is the same player that I believe UJAM runs for some of their instruments, like, the drums, the pianos, this stuff like that. And it's a very minimal, simple interface, which I do like. I also like how you can kind of resize it here in the corner. So I can make it as small as I like or as large as I like. In this case, let's just leave it kind of mid-size. And right up top here, you can see those 5 different modes. Of course, they're assigned to different key switches, naturally because the violin doesn't go up to or down to these areas. It's very simple to just switch between them and have the different mode that you want to play. So we're going to stick with improv for now. This is kind of the most versatile mode. And what's also really cool is here in the settings, you can read more about these modes if you click the performer guide, click the mood, and then you can read a bit about these. So let me quickly run you through here. The improv style, or the mood, is ideal for all tempos and a great way to start playing, and it offers the most variety in selecting our on-bow legatos, as well as utilizing the bow change legatos to be in phrase. So very expressive and flexible. Then we have emotive, which is the softest of the moods, which is good for slower paced pieces and lower dynamics. Assertive, naturally, is the most aggressive and always opens with a marcato at the beginning of the phrase, and is great for faster passages and has faster legatos. Then we have classical, which has the similar character to the assertive, I guess, but it plays with mostly fingered legato and is ideal for faster MF to FF phrasing, and the sprightly is great for aggressive fast runs. So you can see it's a pretty versatile instrument, at least from the description of these different moods. For me personally, I'll probably stick with the improv and the emotive for most of my personal writing and my music, but it's nice to have all these different available moods here, of course. So without further ado, let's just play a little bit. I'm going to start with the improv mode. I'll take you through these other ones as well, and then we'll see how we can fine tune this a little bit if we need that flexibility. So here we go. I'm not going to use the mod wheel, by the way. I'm just going to use my fingers on the playable range from the G all the way up to this high F. And let's just see how this goes. Here we go. All right, so that's just a quick lesson to the standard out-of-the-box sound, and it's loaded legato by default. So you can see this instrument really is intended as a soloist performer. They call it the virtual performer, which kind of interprets your performance, your velocities, your all the different notes you're playing, the length of those notes, and it kind of takes in different samples and stitches them together for this performance, which is really cool. Now, of course, you have the articulations, which we talked about. So the arcs are basically like little swells, little crescendos, if you will. So the arc, let me just demonstrate this really quickly. It's kind of that swell there. Then we have the mid arc, which is kind of a crescendo, decrescendo. Right, and then sustained marcatos. That's diminuendo. Let's go through some shorts as well. Staccato, spiccato, pizzicato, ricochet, and a bit of col legno as well. Okay, those are the shorts there. And, oh, by the way, I want to quickly mention how the staccatos and spiccato and the pizzicato, these are all polyphonic shorts. But the ricochet, interestingly, is monophonic by default. So if you play multiple notes, only one or the earlier one that you would initially trigger will come out first. So if you want to transition to another note, you can do that, but it's going to cut off the end of the first one as well. Same with the marcato, I believe. So that's monophonic as well. Then we have the different legato styles. And so the quarter note legato is the fastest one. Half note's a little slower, and the whole legato feels bordering on kind of like a portamento, but it's more of like a slur legato. Portamento is actually down here, and then we also have the bow change legato as well. So, for example, if you're playing a passage and you don't really like the default sort of style that the virtual performer is giving you, then you can always force the type of legato you want. So maybe you want something a little bit faster, a little bit more agile, then you can use the quarter legato. If you want something with a bit more emphasis and some slides between the notes, then the whole legato, you can just hold that key switch, for example, and then play some notes. Right, you can hear those notes are taking up a little more space in the transitions, whereas if I press the quarter legato and force that legato type, right, it sounds like a pretty fast finger legato sort of thing, and so there's definitely a difference there. And then, of course, like we said, bow change and portamento, so let's have a quick listen to the bow change. Right, so you definitely get that portamento there. Very expressive, but you definitely want to use that sparingly. You definitely don't want to make it drip with emotion every single passage that you're playing. And one more thing I want to point out here, for faster loading, you can see there's this kind of orange bar at the very top. And by default, the engine streams in the samples from your hard drive. It's always recommended you load it on an external hard drive, by the way. And so if you want to load in every single sample without having the engine needing to, take its time to load in everything, then you can do that. I believe, let me just take a look here. Find control, here we go. In the find control tab, you can click load all the samples and it will load everything. And then you can always purge the samples as well. But I think for the streaming, it's really good because the samples load in relatively quickly. And once you commit to your performance, like once you've tweaked the different samples and stuff, you can always just print it to audio, or you can just leave the performance as is in the MIDI mode. And then the engine has basically just loaded the samples that you needed for your performance instead of loading in every single thing, which could naturally impact your CPU performance. So just a quick note there. All right, so that is a quick look at the improv mood. Let me just quickly go through the others here: emotive, assertive, classical, and sprightly, and then we'll move on. So here's the emotive. All right. So one thing, when I was playing along with the library, one thing I would love to have available to me, and it's possible it is, I just haven't found it yet, and I reached out to support about this, but sometimes I want to have a longer sustain. I find that sustains in general trigger for about 3 seconds, 2 to 3 seconds. But sometimes if I'm playing something super emotional, let's say, and I want a super long sustain, then I'm going to want that note to hold a little bit longer. And maybe I don't necessarily want the auto rebowing feature as well. Maybe I don't want a rebow. So it might not be the most realistic thing for them to hold a note for a whole minute while on the same bow, but just to have that option is really, really cool. Not sure if they'd really do, but that's just a minor little gripe that I came across. But I think that also factors into the character of this library, though. It's called Bohemian Violin, so naturally it has a very virtuosic nature to it. So to me, that kind of screams, vibrato heavy, very passionate, not necessarily intended for all the slowest passages in the world. It's very flexible and very fast, right? So that's the type of performance you're going to get. Very agile, very expressive at the same time. All of that stuff contributes to this sort of library that is very flexible in most regards when you're going to need a virtuosic violin. And I also saw on VI Control and some other forums, people were saying that this library is meant to be for the orchestra to fit around it. So like you create the performance using the library, you tweak it, and it has a very soloistic nature to it, right? So you craft the performance, and once you're happy with it, then you add in the rest of the arrangement around it to surround it. Whereas other libraries fit in the mix a lot easier, and as playing with the other instruments a little bit better, this library is intended for the solo standout purpose. So that's what you're getting with this sort of library. So yeah, that's the articulations. Then the reverb and space, you can fiddle around with the amount of wet and dry. Again, the fine control is there for you as well. And then yes, they give you a nice description of each of these kind of features in the library. One thing I really want to point out is the legato. So this is really interesting. I've actually never encountered a library like this before, but when you play subsequent notes that are not overlapped, it will still trigger a legato, but it's going to basically trigger a bow change legato. So if I play like a G, for example, and then I play another different note, but I don't overlap the notes through MIDI, it's still going to trigger legato, but it's going to be a bow change legato. Whereas if we do overlap the notes, then it's going to be a more fingered legato or any sort of on bow legato, right? So it's a different approach, but it's actually really interesting. So I don't have to worry about necessarily making sure that all the notes are overlapped if I want to trigger legato. This is more triggering the different type of legato. So really quick demonstration. And by the way, they have rebow, of course. So if you play a note, you play the same note, it's going to rebow, which is really good if you have multiple notes you want to repeat at the same time. Or you know, one after the other, then the engine has enough samples and variety to do that. So here's a couple of examples of just separating the notes very, very slightly. And so you notice here in the graphic, the violin was consistently switching between up bow and down bow because I was not overlapping the notes. Now, if I do overlap the notes, right, then you can see that's basically all with the down bow there. So yeah, it's entirely up to you, but the flexibility you have with this engine is what really makes it fun to play with and inspiring. So it's, yeah, like I think I've seen the walkthrough videos on the Virharmonic YouTube channel before, and one thing that kind of put me off a little bit was, again, not just the engine itself, which was hosted on UVI. It's not my favorite engine, but it was also the interface looked a little convoluted. But now with this new update, it looks a lot simpler. And so the moods are at the top, which is great if you just want that starting point and you want to get that atmosphere and the style of performance. And then if you want to see the different, you know, things you can tweak with, then you can go into the settings and take a look at all of this stuff. And one more thing I just want to show you quickly here is the Maestro mode, which is kind of cool. So I've key switched it to B1, and this allows us to, let's take a look. Let's go back to the regular page. We can trigger between the solo mode, second solo, so it's, I guess it treats like a second solo violin. Then we have trio, which is multiple instruments, 3 players. We have chamber size, like 5 players. Which is really cool. It actually does sound like quite a few players. And then we have trio to VC and chamber to VC too. So that's kind of cool. But I think for most of the time, I would probably be sticking with the solo performer mode, in which case I probably don't need the Maestro to begin with. But anyway, that's an option there if you want to. And they have dedicated walkthrough videos on their channel about that as well. So all in all, for me, in terms of the libraries that I currently have at the moment, I would say that this library is definitely the most, well, in addition to Joshua Bell Violin, these two are probably two of the most flexible violin libraries we have on the market. If I had to absolutely choose between them right now, I would probably lean towards this one, just because, not just because I'm like doing a video on this right now, but mainly because I've always found the Joshua Bell Violin to have a very strident upfront tone, but way more so than this library. So this library, even though it's intended for that soloistic purpose, the performances feel a lot more linked up together, and the virtual performer makes it, to me at least, much more realistic, and it feels a lot more flowing and more conceivable that it's a real violin player. Whereas for Joshua Bell, when you're playing and improvising on the keyboard, there are so many different articulations and so many moods is kind of switching between, that the performance, while it definitely works and the engine is really fast and it keeps up, to me it kind of feels like it's a bit overkill in some respects. So this library to me kind of has that nice middle ground between giving you a ton of options, but also just being super inspiring and fun to play. And last night I found myself closing down Logic after working, but then reopening it a little bit later because I just wanted to play around with this library a little bit more. I don't do that often, but when I do, I know it's because the library is just super fun to play. So there we go. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of this violin. I hope you enjoyed the sound as well. This is one that's really stood out to me. Again, it's really upfront. It has a very detailed, clear sound, so the tone fidelity is excellent. And my favorite stuff to kind of play with this violin are the faster stuff, like fast runs. You can hear how it kept up pretty easily, and there's just an agileness and, you know, expressiveness to this violin that you don't find in other libraries as well. It's very, very responsive, but also very passionate. So you do have to kind of write around the stylistic tendencies of the library. But if you're writing in that kind of style that the library works for, then you're pretty much golden, you know? But there is that passionate, virtuosic flair that this library has that if you don't like, then it might not be the best fit for you. So it's just entirely dependent on what you really need. But for me, I could definitely see myself using this for those flourishes and those more high intensity, passionate moments. And yeah, it'll serve me really well, well in that case, I think. So anyway, let me just quickly get into the giveaway. Again, big thanks to Virharmonic for sharing a copy with us. 3 rules apply as usual. Number 1, fill out the form below in the description. Just enter your name and email, and I'll reach out in a couple of days to let you know who the winner of this library is. Number 2, just leave a comment underneath this video letting me know why you want this library, what you would use it for. I would love to know as well. And then third and finally, just leave a like on the video, and it's always appreciated. It definitely helps out the channel, so thank you so much. All right. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. And next week, I'll be taking a look at the cello, of course. So stay tuned for that, and I'll catch you in that one. All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.